Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Chef from 2014. So, this is not a movie I intended to watch. Well, it's a movie I heard about when it came out and had recommended to me a few times, but not one I intended to watch recently, and definitely not one I intended to review on the channel. However, I watched it yesterday, and reflecting upon it today, I feel like I want to talk about it a little bit. Some of you will remember me talking a bit about Jon Favreau in the Mandalorian video that I did. And I quite like a lot of Jon Favreau's work as a writer and producer. This is a movie that came out well after his big rise in the MCU, obviously, and is a bit of a twist on his usual work, because it's a small, inexpensive, independent passion project film. And how do I talk about it? It's not that complicated. I would almost say it's not that special. But what makes me continue to reflect upon it is that I think its great strength is its earnestness. The plot is incredibly simple. The characters are not particularly deep. The general premise is not that engaging. And a lot of the scenarios in the film are incredibly simplistic and unrealistic, basically, to the point of absurdity. And yet, it does all of this with an earnestness that continues to ring in my head, where, by all accounts, all of the parts of this film should be a film I'm kind of mediocre to, not happy with. But it's so honest and earnest and trying so hard in a way that really only you rarely see outside of like student films or first productions from independent filmmakers, that I feel like it sticks out as something that's worth watching as a result. And that's not to say that it doesn't have other merits, but that is really what's sticking with me. I feel like I have to mix in the good and the bad of the film, because they are mixed in the film. Casting is interesting. There's a lot of big names on this film for a film that was made for a pretty paltry $11 million, allegedly. It has Jon Favreau is the writer and director of the film. He also stars as the main character. The movie also has Sofia Vergara, John Leguizamo, Scarlett Johansson, and Dustin Hoffman, and Robert Downey Jr. And like all of them are pretty big names. And obviously Favreau is using his clout to get some of these people, and probably has good working relationships with a lot of them based on prior collaboration. And I imagine that a lot of them waived their typical kinds of fees in order to get this film made for a buddy, because I can't imagine this cast being the right cast for an actual independent filmmaker. So the casting is kind of, I hesitate to call it stunt casting, and more like this is who Jon Favreau knows, and who was willing to work with him for not a lot of money. The casting quality varies a little bit. I think all of the characters are a little bit shallow, but all of the actors who play those characters, I think, play the characters pretty well. The one that sticks out in particular is Scarlett Johansson is cast as like a front of house person in this restaurant, and like it's still Scarlett Johansson. She's still fully done up. She still looks like Scarlett Johansson. And regardless of your personal aesthetic preferences, I don't think it's particularly arguable that she's a incredibly attractive woman. And so to have her, she kind of sticks out as like, why are you done up like this? Because it's not even to say, like, she's been in some films where they, dirty her up and make her not look like a borderline supermodel. And that's kind of the most glaring thing here. Comparatively speaking, Sofia Vergara, who is also an incredibly beautiful woman, is more toned down. And I don't know how much of it is the writing. Like, she is supposed to be a successful businesswoman type of person. And I don't know if it's just a matter, maybe it's a matter of how Scarlett Johansson carries herself in the film, that Sofia Vergara, by comparison, feels much more appropriate in her casting. The other, I think all the other castings are, well, I think both of those castings are mainly solid, with the exception of Scarlett Johansson just not quite sticking out a little bit. Everybody else, I think, is quite well cast and performs their general roles in the film really admirably. I think John Leguizamo actually sticks out. John Leguizamo has had a long career with a lot of borderline to bad movies in his history, but I really like him in pretty much everything I've ever seen him in. He brings an honesty and a very apparent appreciation for the roles that he plays that he just looks like he's happy to be there, and I appreciate that very much. The Robert Downey Jr. is only in one scene, and the scene makes no sense, and the film could go without it. There's about 30% of the scenes in this film could just be completely cut because they have almost no reason to exist. But all of those scenes also are kind of interesting in their own right, even if at the end you're going like, why did we do that? The scenes are still valuable as standalone things. It's more like a sequence of skits, really, than anything else. And I kind of appreciate the earnestness in that. That they're just like, this is what we wanted to do here. And I think it helps to not pad the movie, but to keep a light a light tone and a kind of even moderate to slow tempo to the overall film. And since there's not a huge amount of content in the story to begin with, I think those breaks would be welcome. And even though I say some of those scenes are not necessary, I think their absence would be missed as a result. But how do I talk about this further? One more thing is there's one child actor in the film, and longtime viewers / listeners will know my feelings on child actors. I think the child actor MJ Anthony, I think, is extraordinary. He still falls into the problem of being written a little bit not absurdly, but like written into a story that already contains a lot of like just suspend your disbelief and go on with it moments. His role in the film is interesting and in some ways seems a little ridiculous in how much he facilitates the story moving where it needs to go. And, weaker movie with more overt problems, I might criticize that more. But the rest of the film, like I said, is so just sort of on its face enjoyable. And the kid puts on such a great performance, I think, as a very believable, like, young teenager, in a way that is both executed well and also written well enough to, like, impart his age, but also not be annoying about it. That I just really appreciate his performance overall as well. Like I said, the story's kind of weak. I mean, the story is kind of nothing, is what it is. It's not particularly special. It falls into a lot of like, we just sort of wanted this to happen. We're not going to explain everything about it, and there's a lot of things that are just kind of very convenient, or to the point of this wouldn't ever happen. It just wouldn't. But again, it's done with like an honesty that it's just like, I don't think that would happen, but you know what? Let's just keep watching. And that is a rare thing in a lot of films. Aesthetically, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think there's not a lot special to say about the cinematography or the general styling. There's a lot of shots in the film that really linger on food, since it's a movie substantially about food. And while there are a few of those that feel a little bit self-indulgent, as if I'm honest, the entire film feels a little self-indulgent, again, I feel like I'm turning into a broken record here, but it feels like a very honest approach to it, where they're just like, yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just looking at this food. It's good food. Look at how nice it is. It's nice. And then it moves on. And I think that extends to a lot of the cinematography, where I'm not really wowed by the camera work or the lighting or the framing or anything like that. I don't think it does a lot of cinematic storytelling using any of those features, but it's nice enough to look at, and just the certain subtle stylistic elements do follow the general tone that I think it works very effectively for the film. There are a few scenes for every. There are a lot of scenes that, like I said, could be cut completely. There's only like, I want to say 2 that I would just like to be removed entirely, or I would like a certain part of them to be removed, because it seemed like they just, it's a little like an improv group that couldn't figure out how to end a scene. And that awkwardness was just a little too much, and I had to go, nope, no, it's now taken me out of it. But aside from that, I think that it's well paced and well constructed and generally well written. I do think that the audio editing, well, the audio in general deserves particular mention, both because I think the audio is used effectively in a variety of different ways, whether it's environmental noise or drawing your attention with certain audio editing styles that I think is kind of just helps pull the sometimes otherwise questionable scenes together a little bit. But the number one thing for me that I enjoyed the most was not even the food, it was the music. The soundtrack of this film is just great, like basically top to bottom, including several live performances from a couple of groups. I discovered a new band I want to check out, and there's a lot of really interesting covers of popular music, like not popular in a historical sense, not in a modern pop music sense. And in particular, I think Gary Clark Jr. deserves particular point out. He's a great musician in general, and it took me a minute to recognize him. I was like, wait a minute, I totally recognize this guy. So he has two like live performances in the film, and it's not distracting at all, but it is notable because he's a great artist and the performances are really good. But the whole soundtrack is full of reinterpretations of some great music in new styles that I really, really like. And I don't know how many of those were, I sort of assume a lot of them were already existing and were just found by the editors and producers and just fit really well because in addition to being catchy, they also fit the time and place where they're used in the film, because in addition to being a film about food, it's a film about it's a film about a lot of emotion, and a film about places and how food is attached to certain places. And in that way, the tones of music being used in certain scenes are super important to setting like an emotional foundation for those scenes. So yeah, this is not a really great film by any measure, but it's a very enjoyable one, I think. And if you, even if you're like me and you like to nitpick things, I think there's a lot to get out of this film. Well, not a lot to get out of it, but like it's just kind of comfortable and nice, and there's some good performances and some great music, and despite the absurdity, it just feels good. It was very earnest and honest and kind of what I needed. So anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.